Chapter 7. Rescuing Mo. Mo. I don't know how long I was there after I saw those guys leave. Few hours? I lost track. Figured they was gone. They got out. If I was going to get out, I had to do it on my own. I was stuck in a very small area, maybe 20 feet wide and 70 feet long. The water was still raging beside me, and I had a wall of coal on the other. After looking around, I noticed there was a golf cart partly underwater just below me. It had some stuff on it, electrical tape, a raincoat, a toolbox. I put the raincoat on right away because it was starting to get cold. Breathing was a big factor. I'd keep trying to calm myself down. Well, I knew it was a lack of oxygen, and I was thinking, please God, I was looking for help all the time, you know? Thinking of my kids, gotta get out of here, gotta get across this water. How can I get across this water? I went to see if the golf cart would run. Well, it wasn't going to go nowhere, but I just wanted to see if it would move. I turned the light on, pointed it toward the hole in the wall, thinking if they do come back up, maybe they'll see it. I made a camp at that golf cart. I thought, this is where it's going to happen. I got to come up with a plan. I'm looking around. There's very few options. Very little options. No options. After failing to escape out the return, Randy and the others were slowly working their way back up toward the face, where it was still high and dry. The air was getting bad. It smelled of sulfur. Several of the older guys, including Tucker and Randy, were having a tough time. About 4 hours had passed since Mo first broke into the old mine. Now, after fighting the water for most of that time, they were all exhausted and depressed. About the only thing keeping them going was Mo. They wanted to find him. Blaine and Tucker went ahead and started pushing open the small doors that separated the intake from the main section of the mine, hoping they might find some trace of him. Flathead went back up toward the phone, hoping he might be able to call out, but the water had washed away the line. Meanwhile, Mo, thinking the other guys were either gone or dead, hatched his escape plan. Mo, I'm looking for ways across this river. There's no way I can do it, but I have to. I have to save myself. I have to try. So I'm looking around. I see the water hose coming through. I thought about tying that to my waist and trying to walk across, but no, that ain't going to work. I see hydraulic hoses on that golf cart, a 4-foot hose. I thought I'd wrap that around me, then tape it to the water line and try to go across this way. So I tie this hose around me, then I tape it to the water line really tight. I just tape the shit out of it. I figure, hell, I better tape my hard hat on too. If I lost my hat and my light, I'd be screwed. I step out into the water. I think, no way, this ain't gonna work neither. I had to find some way to pull me across here. So I'm thinking. There's J-hooks strung across the roof above the water. We use them for hanging cables out of the way. Can't reach them. So I use some tools that was in the toolbox. I tape them all together and make a pole. I fish them off the roof and tape them to my hands, so I had like hooks on my hands. My idea was that I was going to use those J-hooks to hook onto the roof and kind of climb across. Like monkey bars, you know? I get my other stuff ready. I find a hammer that is on the golf cart because my hammer is gone. I keep the raincoat on. I thought I might need the hammer because if I cross this water, I gotta knock that wall out to get through, so I'll have this ball-peen hammer. I tape it to my belt so I don't lose it in the water. Finally, I say, well, hell, I gotta get moving. I gotta try it. I figured I could go backward on my back so the water would keep me afloat because it was going that fast. I'm 2 steps into the water. It's probably 3 feet deep, but it's running 90 miles an hour. It's just flying up and hitting me. The 3rd step, I keep putting my foot in, but it's so deep and fast it just keeps taking my foot away. I had it in my mind I ain't going to make it, but I had to try something. If I was going to die, at least I wanted to die trying to get out rather than just sitting there waiting to drown or suffocate. So I'm ready to turn around there and throw myself in, and I see a light. Flathead. I walked up a little bit past the feeder, and I had seen the golf cart light on the other side of the water. There was a little hole in one of the walls, letting some of the light through, so I went over and knocked some more blocks out, and there was Mo. Mo. When I saw that light, I jumped right back to dry land. I looked over, and I seen it was Flathead. I yelled, "Man, am I glad to see you, buddy!" Flathead signaled to Mo that he was going to get the other guys, then ran back to tell them what he'd found. Man, did that lift our spirits, said Tucker. They all hustled over and stood at the edge of the gushing water across from Mo. It was only about 20 feet, but with the rushing water it may as well have been a mile. How were they going to get him across? Hound Dog. When we all went up there, that was the first time we got to see the water up close. To really understand what was coming in. Just a wild, rushing river. I mean, just the wildest rushing river you can imagine. Flathead said, "You better talk to Mo. He ain't taking it too good." Mo is in tough shape. I mean, he's hyperventilating, froze to death, scared to death, by himself. I mean, he's pretty rough. When I got over there, he said, "I gotta get out of here, Randy." "You will," I told him, but I wasn't sure how. First they tried throwing a long piece of cable across, hoping Mo could grab it and they could pull him through the water. No way. The water just washed the cable right away before Mo could grab it. They tried reaching across with a bolter probe, a 20-foot-long metal rod, but it was too flimsy. Randy wondered if they could just wait for the old mine to empty itself, or at least slow down so Mo could get across, but that could take hours, and the water showed no signs of running itself out. Finally, Randy came up with a last-ditch plan. He'd drive the scoop into the raging water, and hopefully the bucket would reach far enough across so that Mo could jump into it. It was an outlandish idea. What if the water swept the scoop down the entry? After all, it had already pushed the 60-ton miner 20 feet back. Whoever was driving the scoop would probably go down with it. And what if Mo missed the bucket when he jumped? Randy. When I explained to Tucker what I was going to do, he said, "Well, there ain't no way you're going to get over there with that. It's going to just take it down," he said. "Well, I gotta try. Mo ain't going to stay over there much longer." Blaine. Because it was my scoop, I thought I was going to drive it. I would have given it a try, but Randy said, "I'll do it." And my father-in-law took me inside and said, "You're not doing it, Blaine." Unger. I said to Randy, "Man, there's nothing I can do to help you if that thing starts to go. If you get out in there, we'll sit and watch you go by." So I told him, "All you need to do is just inch it out and inch it out. That's real easy as long as you keep back where it's fairly anchored," I said. "You might be able to back away from it if it does get carried away." Randy. I just took it tentatively. As I inched the scoop out into the water, I had the tires up against the rib of the mine, hoping that would help hold it. I feeled it around a little bit, and I got to a point I couldn't go much farther. I yelled at Mo, "Far enough?" He shook his head no. I thought, oh boy, this is getting pretty touchy here. So I wiggled around a couple more feet and I yelled, "You make it now?" Then he got ready to jump. Hound Dog. We're all just standing back here watching. There's nothing we can do, we just hoped and kind of held our breath. I watched the tires. I was watching the tires. I mean, it's going to take the tires and go. If he would have come any further, it would have. Finally, he stopped and said, "Jumped in." I looked. "No way," I said. "It's too far. You need to come a little bit more." I didn't want to miss because, God damn it, if I do, I'm going down instantly. I more or less dove into it. I didn't roll into it. I just went head first with my hands out. I felt that hard steel and slid right into the back of the bucket. Stayed there until they got me across where they were. Mo's return was the first moment of triumph they'd had in many hours. Mo admitted that if Flathead had arrived a minute later, it would have been too late. My third step into the water would probably have been my last. Boogie. When we got Mo back, Randy was really relaxed. He knows that we're all together now. We're all going to go as a team. We're all going to drown, or we're all going to get out of this mess somehow. Mo. I was happy, man, yeah. Man, let me tell you. Of course, the other guys were in a different mood. I'm bullshitting with John Unger, and I couldn't figure out why he was not saying much. I didn't know the shit they just went through. It took me a while to figure out what was going on. I'd just gotten out of one situation, and now I was trapped again. But at least I was with my buddies. This map, published in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, gives a good visual representation of what it looked like inside the Quecreek mine. The graphic is not drawn to scale, however. The passageways in the mine are actually much narrower in comparison with the coal pillars. Also, Dennis Hall's shuttle car, pictured here in a crosscut between entries 5 and 6, was actually directly behind the miner, heading straight down entry 6. at the time of the breakthrough. So it was actually over here. Workers check a drill bit being used to bore an escape hole. Friday morning, July 26th. A rescue worker listens as he holds a microphone cable and hears the miners' voices. Saturday, July 27th. Randy Fogel is helped out of the rescue capsule. Sunday, July 28th. Blaine Mayhew is helped out. Thomas Foy is rescued. Miners on the surface reach out to shake hands with John Unger as he is lifted from the hole in the capsule. Ron Hillman is rescued. John Filippi is rescued. Robert Pugh is carried to the medical tent. Rescue workers celebrate as Mark Popernak nears the surface. Mark Popernak gives a thumbs up as he is lifted to the surface. Workers hook equipment to a drill to create an escape tunnel. Miners, left to right, Larry Somerville, Doug Custer, and Jim Weiland embrace after their co-workers were rescued. Sunday, July 28th. Chapter 8, Building Walls. The men gathered at the bolter at the top of entry 4. It was, for the moment, high and dry. Several hours had passed since the breakthrough. The machine was still warm, providing a small but welcome comfort to Randy and his crew as they leaned against it. They had no idea what was going on above ground. Did anyone know they were trapped in there? Had the other crew gotten out, or were they all dead? Was there already a rescue operation in progress, or were the rescuers going to wait until morning to get started? These thoughts were all the more urgent because the air in the mine was now thick and stifling. The water had cut off the ventilation system. There was no circulation, nothing coming in from outside. Their chests were heaving. They felt weak and lightheaded. Several of them walked over to a quiet spot and threw up. Boogie. Randy said there was only one drill that he knows of that can drill a hole big enough to get us out, and that's in Arkansas. And we're thinking, geez, Arkansas, that's a long way from here. Randy said he thinks that in 12 hours they can have it anywhere they want. I'm thinking, we don't got 12 hours. And he said, yeah, Arkansas is the only drill I know. Randy kept assuring us, telling us that there's good people that's trying to get us out of here. I wanted to believe him, and I said, just think, boys, we'll be on Channel 6 News tonight. Flathead. I got on the scoop and we went down entry 5 trying to see if we could escape that way. Nothing. We went down the intake and checked the doors. I mean, you would open it just a crack and the water rushed in. We just checked a couple of them, and then Randy said, let's head back up. And when we got there, he said, okay, we're going to start building walls. Building walls is an old coal miner's survival strategy after a cave-in or roof fall. By barricading themselves in a small area, miners can protect themselves from further collapse and conserve body heat. They can thus bide their time while they await rescuers. In this case, building walls might help Randy's crew keep the rising water off them for a few extra hours. But barricading oneself in, as every coal miner knows, is an admission of defeat, and the first step toward a long, slow death by suffocation or drowning. These guys weren't afraid of dying, but they didn't want to do it slowly. Before they started the walls, they needed a decent supply of drinking water. There was, of course, water all around, but nobody wanted to drink it. As it later turned out, they could have. It might have just given them indigestion, nothing worse. Luckily, there were 12 jugs of distilled water for the machinery stockpiled not far away, which they grabbed with the scoop. Blaine. Deep down, you knew the walls weren't going to hold the water back. You have to try. There's always a chance. But you know if that water wants to come in, it's going to come in. Boogie. It was tough. I remember taking a deep breath, talking to the guys about building walls, then taking another deep breath, saying a few more words. Every breath was a struggle. You had to use your mouth and really pull it in. I was sure we was going to suffocate. Unger. I said, Fogel, I don't think they're going to get to us in time, man. I think this is too big. Oh, they're going to get us, he'd say. They're going to get us. He would always tell me that. Unger. Or Tucker. I didn't mind the hard breathing. I figured, buddy, if we're going to go, this is the way we want to go. Because we know this water down here is going to be coming up sooner or later. You're looking at maybe 30 to 60 crosscuts. Boogie. I wasn't worried about drowning at first. I thought maybe the pumps would pump everything out and the water would quit running. I told the guys, them old-timers never went far in the mines. Never went that far in the mines. Don't worry about it. We'll be okay. The water's going to slow down. Ain't even going to fill half the mine up. I didn't realize this old mine was 6-7 miles deep. Blaine. When we decided to start building walls, Randy sent me to charge the scoop batteries so we'd have plenty of power. I had to go down 25 crosscuts. When I got down there, my scoop charger was underwater. I had to turn around. When I came back to I told Randy, we've got 25 walls left. At the rate the water it was coming in, I figured that meant 8 or 10 hours. They planned to build 4 walls between the entries and the crosscuts, each about 70 feet long, and the same height as the mine, 4.5 feet, making a rectangular enclosure about 100 feet by 150 feet. The walls were dry laid with concrete cinder block, frequently used in mines and stockpiled nearby, then coated with thick sealant, which they applied with their hands. This was tough work under the best of circumstances, but under these conditions it was downright brutal. Blaine. When it came to the wall building, I basically took charge. At one point, Mo even told me, Blaine, you've got to slow down and save your energy. And I'm like, fuck it. I want to get these walls built. I ain't going out like this. The first wall took an hour, maybe longer. The bad air, the hard work, and the cold quickly took its toll on the men. The second wall was even slower. When Blaine and the others struggled, Randy, Harpo, Hound Dog, and Tucker retreated up to the bolter to rest. A few of them dozed off. Flathead. I'd been running around like a nut until then. Now I couldn't breathe. I had a bad headache and I was sick in the stomach. I did a little bit of work, but I just couldn't do much because I felt so miserable and my chest hurt. So I just laid in the scoop there and those guys built 2 walls. Then I got up and helped them get some more blocks. Before long, Blaine, Boogie, and Unger were the only guys still throwing up blocks. Mo. I had to take a break. That lack of oxygen, buddy, it breaks you down. I mean, everybody was kicking in the ass. Poor Tucker was really having a rough time. He laid up at the bolter by himself for a while. Randy even told me, I'm worried about Tom. He's in bad shape. And I yelled up at him a couple of times, Tom, you all right? Yeah, buddy, he'd call back. He was just laying up there, trying to absorb some heat. Unger. Randy said his heart really hurt bad. I said, you surely aren't going to die on us, are you? I'm going to hate it if you die, because we're going to be in a lot of trouble. And he said, no, but it really hurts. And Tucker, you know he had heart trouble, too. Tucker had recently had 2 stents put in to open clogged arteries. Randy asked him if there was any nitro with him, and Tucker said, no, it's up above. I thought of all the times to forget his stuff. I said, whatever you do, Fogel, don't die, man. We need you real bad. Randy and his crew had no way of knowing, but above ground the rescue operation was just getting started. One of the first workers to the site was Bob Long, a local surveyor who was awakened at about 11:30 p.m. by a phone call and rushed to the site. Long is a sustained 37-year-old is a sun-tanned 37-year-old bad boy with a bad boy attitude and a fondness for gold chains. When he arrived, he met immediately with Joe Gallo, the mine engineer at the Quecreek mine, and the secretary and the treasurer of PBS Coal, and Dave Rebuck, the president of Black Wolf Coal. Their outlook, Long says, was bleak. Gallo and Rebuck were freaked. Everybody was freaked. At that point, I was thinking bodies. Gallo looked at me, and he had a shit-scared look on his face. I know he was thinking bodies, too. Gallo and Rebuck, who were in contact with the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection's Deep Mine Rescue Team, knew that the first thing they had to do was get air to the trapped men. The only practical way to do that was to drill a 6-inch hole from the surface down to the mine, a distance of about 240 feet. But where to drill the hole? They had to get the hole down quick. A miscalculation could waste hours of precious time. They knew the area of the mine the crew had been working in, and guessed that the miners had probably retreated to the highest point in that section. They marked several spots on the mine map, and decided to let the surveyors pick the best one. It was Long's job to translate those spots on the map to spots on the ground. Using a high-tech global positioning system, GPS, similar to the one that the U.S. military uses to guide smart bombs, Long and his boss, Sean Eisgen, tracked the coordinates until they led them to the middle of a field just off Route 985, a busy two-lane road in Somerset. They quickly discovered that of the 3 potential drilling spots, only one in the area was easily accessible by drilling rigs. Bob Long. It was just an open field, nobody around. We were out there in the dark trying to locate this spot when a guy in a truck pulls up and comes at us with a .45 pistol in his hand. He says, "What the fuck is going on?" I recognized him immediately. It was Billy Arnold, the farmer who owns the land. Hell of a nice guy. I say, "Billy, chill. It's Bob." I explained what's going on. He just unloaded his gun, threw the clip out, and said, "Do whatever you have to do. If you need to rip my fence down, whatever. I don't care." So I got my handheld GPS box out, checked the coordinates again, and walked around until I found the spot. I looked at Sean, and Sean looked at me and goes, "Is that it, right there?" I was like, oh, fuck. My ass was sucked up into my throat. So far it's the middle of the night, it's dark. What if some of the underground survey marks I was using had been off? Sean asked me 600 times, "Are you sure this is a spot? Are you sure?" I said, "You've trusted me with this goddamn thing for 2 years. Why would you stop now? This is the spot, right here." Mo. We was working. We heard this sound above us. Son of a bitch, they're drilling already. It was a good sound. Randy, I knew from how fast it was coming down that it was not a rescue hole. I knew it was either communications or air. You're not going to drill that fast if it's a rescue hole. Much as we needed the air, what the guys were really hoping for was a telephone. We wanted to tell our wives and family that we were okay. That was top on our minds. Boogie, that guy punched that hole quick. It took like an hour and a half. I thought I heard some drilling. Bam, it was there. The drill bounced off about a foot off the bottom of the mine. I was standing right beside when it broke through. Scared the hell out of me. When they're trapped, miners are trained to communicate by tapping, a sort of miner's Morse code. This code is written on a sticker that every coal miner has inside his hard hat, although with years of hard use, the stickers often wear away or become illegible. Randy and the others quickly gathered around the protruding steel bit. Randy, I asked who had a sticker in their hard hat, and Mo had one. I said, "We're going to get this right." So Mo took off his helmet, and we looked inside. You're supposed to hit 3 times to establish communication. Then after they answer, hit once for each guy. That's what we did. 3 taps. Then when they answered, we hit it 9 times again. Tuck banged on it with his hammer. Tuck banged on it with his hammer. Then I banged on with mine. From then on, everything was 9. Every time we bang on this pipe, it's 9 times. Or any time we bang on the roof, it's 9 times. We wanted to be sure they knew there was 9 of us alive down here. Boogie, I heard them banging in response. "Come here, boys, listen to this," I said. It was clear as a bell. They were answering us. A few minutes later, with no warning at all, a screaming came out of the hole, causing the guys to jump back. It was fresh air, heated to 190 degrees, and blown in under such tremendous pressure that it blew out one of the walls they had just built. Boogie, man, that air was loud. We had to stand near it to build the walls, and I could barely do it. It was like a shrieking sound, but yeah, you could breathe a lot better now. We thought, hey, if nothing else, we ain't gonna suffocate. Chapter 9. Sipesville. The Sipesville firehouse is located on a quiet road just a mile or 2 down from where the men were trapped. It's a nice old wooden structure that looks the way a firehouse in a small town is supposed to look, with white clapboard and a big hall off to one side where bingo games and community dances are held. That night it was to host a vigil. The wives and kids of the trapped miners sat in stunned silence, trying to make sense of what had happened to their loved ones. A number of tables and chairs had been hastily set up in the hall. Hot coffee was brewing in the back kitchen, and already food was beginning to arrive. Donuts, sandwiches, snacks, pizza. During that chaotic first night, it was hard for family members to get any good information about what was going on. They had no TV. There was one in the hall, but no one turned it on until later, and were dependent upon rumors and bits of news they heard from friends and family. many of whom knew people involved in the rescue operation and would call the fire hall with updates. In the early hours, family briefings were short and vague. Doug Custer, who had escaped earlier from the mine, tried to keep the families informed, but he was quickly overwhelmed by the job. Dave Rebuck, owner of Black Wolf Coal, stopped in to talk with the families, but didn't offer much new information. Rescuers were understandably more focused on figuring out how to get the men out than they were on keeping the families fully informed. By dawn Thursday, the only real hard facts that most family members knew was that the men had somehow cut into the old Saxman mine, and that between 50 and 60 million gallons of water, it was later determined to be closer to 70 million gallons, had flooded into the mine where they were working. The essential question, of course, was, were the men alive? Had these families been able to turn on a TV at about 7 a.m., they would have heard CNN broadcasting the news that rescuers had picked up the tapping sounds underground, and had the families known that, it might have brought some relief and hope. But they did not know that, at least for a while. Missy Filippi. I was mad as hell we weren't being told anything. We heard about 60 million gallons of water that flooded the mine, and that was about it. At 7 that morning, I called a friend of ours that works in the mine because I just knew they weren't going to tell us the truth about what had happened. And then I took Doug Custer outside. It was just him and me, and I said, I want you to tell me straight. I don't want you to beat around the bushes. Nobody is here but me and you. I said, please, Doug. He got tears in his eyes. He said, it's not good, Missy. Sue Unger. I spent most of that first night with Ron Hillman's wife, Kathy. She was the only person I really knew there. At first I was pretty hopeful. I'm thinking, they're going to get him out, and then I'll just throw him in the car and we'll come home. It didn't work out that way, especially when they started talking about water. I wasn't concerned because they didn't say it was a cave-in or anything, and I thought if it's water, they had a better chance. I don't know. I don't know anything about a mine. I just had this feeling that they were coming out. Some of the wives wanted the guys who were briefing us to tell us more, to keep us better informed, but there was really nothing to tell us. Missy Filippi. They made you feel stupid. Like when they would say things to you like, what the hell is the word? Inundated. Well, it's flooded to me. You know, when they would say stuff you didn't know what they were saying, and nobody would ask a question because some of them didn't know what the hell they were talking about. So we really had no understanding of what the hell was going on. For a woman, I think, even if your husband works in a mine for 30 years, if you've never been in there and never worked in it, how do you know all that? I felt that way too, like they were thinking. Just dumb wives, we can just tell them anything and they'll believe it. I felt like I had a real responsibility there, a real job to do. John and I had talked about him getting trapped in a mine because, over the years things had happened. And I always told him, honey, I'd never leave you down there. I'd make them get you out. I wouldn't leave you. That's what I always told him because I'm claustrophobic as hell. I'll make them get you out, I always told him. I'll dig. Sue Unger. It was kind of hard to fill in the time because, waiting and waiting is a really hard thing. But as soon as someone would walk in the room would get real quiet, and everyone sat on the edge of their seats, waiting to hear what was happening. I spent most of the night with Kathy Hillman. Her daughters were there too, and we just kind of talked about different things. We didn't really even talk about what was going on or anything. We just kind of tried to talk about other stuff. And then about 6 a.m, I thought, well, maybe I better call somebody. So I called my sister and told her to tell my parents and call the minister and put him on the prayer chain. That first night, while I was sitting there with the Hillman family, Mike Dunlop, he's a local preacher, I didn't even know what church he's affiliated with, was talking with some families. One of the ladies said, we should get Mike to lead us in prayer. So she went over and asked him, and he says, in times like these, a lot of us like to have prayer. If you're not comfortable with this, maybe you'd like to step out. Because he didn't know what kind of people were there. So he handled it very well. And then he had a prayer over us. And then after that, we just continued to have prayer periodically with different ministers or priests leading us. John Weir, a land manager for PBS Coal, usually spends his time trying to secure coal rights for PBS. He's a big, rough-edged guy, 6'4", with a graying mustache and glasses. Like many of the guys who work for the mines, he's a big hunter and gun lover. He keeps a small caliber pistol in his pocket and a .357 Magnum stashed in his silver Dodge Dakota pickup. Weir had spent most of Wednesday night securing old maps of the Saxman mine to help rescuers understand what they were dealing with. In the early morning, Dave Rebuck approached him. "We need someone to go over to the fire hall and keep the families updated." Weir recalls, "You want to take care of that?" I volunteered for the job, having no idea what I was getting into. Like everyone else, Weir was caught up in the emotion of the rescue. He knew many of the men down there and had suffered through a horrific mining accident himself. When he had been nearly killed when another worker accidentally clubbed him in the head with a sledgehammer. In those early hours, Weir did his best to lay out the general situation at the rescue site, telling the families that the air hole was now finished, the men were getting air, and a larger drill rig was headed to the site from West Virginia to begin drilling the rescue hole. But as to the question of whether the men were alive or dead, Weir added little. He said he didn't know, recalls Missy Philippi, which, as Weir later agreed, was not exactly true. He had in fact been at this site when the rescue workers heard the miners tapping early that morning. "I was standing right there and heard it loud and clear," he says, but when he first arrived at the firehouse, he didn't tell the families this. "I don't know why," he admits. "I just didn't. Maybe I didn't want to get their hopes up. Looking back, it was probably a mistake." John Weir. "The first time I walked into the firehouse, I didn't expect that many people there. There were, 60, 70. I also didn't expect to see the sadness. I didn't expect the questions, the confrontations. They wanted to be told everything. I mean, there was some screaming going on in there." Missy Philippi. "On Thursday morning sometime, John Weir came in and he was hemming and hawing again. He's not a public speaker, for one. He's almost in tears. He was so upset and everything." I looked at him and thought, don't be sugarcoating it and stuff, and don't be pussyfooting around. He was ready to bust out crying. I know what he's thinking. He thought they were dead too. It's all he could do to stand there and face us all. And that's when I stood up and said, "I don't speak for everybody here, but I think I speak for the majority." I said, "Don't be pussyfooting around and spitting and sputtering. Just say what you need to say. Get it out." And I just sort of went on and on. I was angry. I was mad. I didn't understand why they were treating us like this, keeping information from us, not telling us everything they knowed. These were our husbands down there. We had a right to know what was going on. At that point, I had no idea if they were doing everything they could or not, because they hadn't offered to take us up there or nothing. They would come in and they would say stuff, but a lot of it made no sense to me because they didn't show you a picture or draw any diagrams or anything to make it easier to understand. All I could think of was 50 million gallons of water, and it's 4 feet high in the mine. So I told all this to John, and then whenever I got hot under the collar, I jumped up and started waving my arms. I wasn't going to attack him. He's like 6'5", I'm only 4'11". John was spitting and sputtering so bad he was ready to burst out crying. I didn't even know what he said, and he's like, "Well, we're, trying our best." And I'm like, I just wanted to go nuts. I didn't trust him. I didn't trust the company, and I thought my husband was dead. Distrust between owners and workers runs deep in the coal industry. You can trace it all the way back to the Crusades of Mother Jones and the West Virginia labor riots in the 1920s. Missy's own bitterness and distrust had been building for years. PBS Coal used to treat their workers really well, like family, she says. Wives would get together for dinners, we all knew each other, but then a few years ago everything changed. They started making John, Flathead, work 10 hours, 6 days a week, while at the same time cutting benefits and never giving any kind of pay raise. What really got Missy was a card the company sent out at Christmas one year. On the front they announced they were giving everyone a 35-cent an hour raise. Then you turned on to the next page and they tell us we have to start paying for our own benefits. 10% of medical, I think it was. I couldn't believe it. Did they think we were stupid or what? Missy Philippi. After my outburst, I left because I felt embarrassed myself, and I went clear up to the corner of the parking lot behind the fire hall. My sister-in-law was with me, and I started to cry. I just said, I don't want to be a widow at 34 and raise a 12-year-old son by myself. What am I going to do? Randy Fogel's mother came up. She's an old lady, a tough old lady. She's sweet, though. She says, honey, you did really good. I'm glad. She was rubbing my head, and I started crying. Sandy Popernak. When Missy started in, I'm thinking, I'm embarrassed. I can't believe this lady is doing this. I left. I walked out. I thought, you know they're doing what they can. Give them a break. I mean, I was still on my first 24 hours, and I was still thinking, they're okay. Of course, then after it got a little longer, then I got a little miffed and started wondering about how much they were telling us. Annette Fogel. Missy just wanted straight answers, and she felt that we weren't getting straight answers. Actually, I think we all felt like that. Well, I won't speak for the other wives, but I know there were times when I felt they were telling us one thing, and then you was hearing something else from somebody else, and then they would come back in and say what the other person had said, so you felt they weren't telling you everything that was going on. John Weir. When I came out of the fire hall after all this, the first thing I did, I called my wife and I said, holy shit, what did I get myself into here? And she said, hey, do what you can and call me whenever you need to. And remember what happened when your dad was killed. My dad got killed in the steel mills, and no one was telling us anything while he was laying in the hospital, but he only made it 12 hours. Every doctor that walked by, you thought they should stop and tell you something, and there was nothing to tell. So I tried to just focus on that, and it kind of got me through. It was not until Thursday afternoon, almost 8 hours after Randy and his crew had first pounded 9 times on the air pipe, that families were finally able to figure out what was going on. Annette Fogel. That afternoon sometime, Mike Wolf, my son's girlfriend's dad, had been home, and he came into the firehouse and said, Annette, it's on CNN. There were 9 taps. And I said, but they're telling us there was no taps. He said, I'm telling you, it was on CNN. There had been 9 taps on that pipe. Mike said he couldn't understand it, because he said John Weir was the one talking on CNN. And I couldn't understand it neither. Leslie Mayhew. I had gone home because the kids needed warmer clothes for in the morning because they were cold. And I knew while they were there, they needed shorts because during the day it was hot. And I'm up there with a worn-out white t-shirt, a pullover jet sweatshirt, and a pair of sweatpants. So I'm not feeling really comfortable running around. When I got home, I walked around the empty house for a few minutes, looking in all the rooms. I figured if Blaine was dead, he'd give me some kind of sign. I'd feel a breeze or something. Something unusual. Something that told me he was trying to communicate with me and tell me he was gone. But I didn't feel nothing like that. The house just felt just the same. Then I got a call from some friends. They're like, they heard tapping. I said, what are you talking about? And they're like, Leslie, they heard tapping. I said, you're kidding me. They say, no, they think they heard 9. But one other one said 5, which is in their hats, their helmets, some distress code. And of course I thought, 5, that means 5 guys. And I'm like, with my luck, 2 of mine would be the 4 that didn't make it. Would be in the 4 that didn't make it. And then I heard later that there were 9 taps, definitely 9. And so I called my mom and I said, guess what? They heard tapping. Put on your news. CNN is coming across live. And that lifted us up for a while. We felt like, yes, this is good.